Okay, so welcome to week two of CS290, Information System Security. Hopefully everyone's been able to get on without problem. I'm still going through, I guess, the um, trying to make sure how many folks are in the class, officially in the class, whatnot. So folks, number of folks have sent me information around, kind of confirming their participation in the class. If you haven't done that yet, please just send me a quick email just confirming. I think some folks have had submitted their introductions, but not an email, and vice versa. So I think some folks have sent me emails without doing the introduction. If possible, I'd like to get both. Um, so help me track the stuff down. I will be sending messages out if you haven't acknowledged yet. I am kind of looking at the timings are basically on Moodle. See, um, last time people have connected and whatnot. So there's some folks who have not been able to connect or have not yet connected. At some point we'll have to make the expectation that they're not, basically they're not in the class. So, but working our way through that. All right. So as I said, what I'm going to do is my intention for this course, the way to kind of keep us on track. I mean, the course itself, the content of the course is pretty much laid out, is out there in terms of the uh, lectures and the slide deck. So that's all out here right now. A couple things. As I said, what I'm doing weekly is I'm putting out an announcement, kind of to keep us on track, kind of where we're at, how we're moving along, and a couple different things. So a couple things this week. So where we're at right now is, and of course, we're still focused on this first topic one. So the topic one, as I had said, is fairly extensive. There are six topic areas in this. This is pretty, it's topic one, but there's a lot of different subject areas in there. So for the first week, what we focused on was this topics 1, 2, and 3. So it's cyber threats analysis, introduction to computer security programs and IT project management, how and then third would be the life cycle, basically the idea of different, the idea of security, not necessarily being anything static, but really something that's dynamic and it continues to evolve. As systems evolve, as development projects evolve, as organizations evolve, the security associated with that needs to align and move along. So the expectation is that you've done it, you did it once, so you're done. You're not done. Basically, security is an ongoing, living thing that continues to needs to be evaluated and adjusted to maintain alignment as needed. Right? So that's really what we covered with 1, 2, and 3. Right? So for this next week, what we're going to look at is the next 3. All right. So that's going to be topic 1.4. We talked around quality assurance. So the idea of evaluating quality assurance, how well things are working, is really when we think about it. Quality assurance. What are the things? How do we know something is good? So what are quality attributes? And the idea of how does this fit within security in the security world. So that's kind of what this is. That's what this topic 1.4 is about. 1.5 we talk about supply chain security. So the idea of modern businesses, modern operations, both business, both military business operations are built around this idea of a supply chain where things are basically things are connected together, operations are connected together, and there's a big focus on transferring you know uh, materials, information from one location to another. So the term we use around this is we call supply chain. And the challenges associated with supply chains are the fact that they can be disrupted. One of the big concerns right now, I think, of the impacts of the coronavirus situation right now is a lot of organizations are seeing big impacts on their supply chain and how their supply chains are being of and this was kind of and this has been it's been noted for other things, but usually the traditional things we look at in terms of supply chain security, supply chain impact, are things like natural disasters. So, for example, a hurricane. So, a lot of case studies that were done around back a couple of years ago in Houston, which was a big center for chemical manufacturing. What happened to chemical company supply chains when their source plants were disrupted? Both through disruption of the physical facilities, the flooding, electrical loss of electrical power, loss of communications, how those the impacts on those organizations and what they had to do. So this is really what this whole idea of kind of putting this into this idea of a threat and risk analysis for supply chain. And then finally, this last piece we're going to talk about this week is dealing with security awareness and training. So the idea is that the challenge with security is that it's not intrinsically wired into systems. Usually, what's happened a lot of times is security is seen as something extra, or something outside, or something you have to do. And the challenge a lot of times is getting people to raising the awareness of the importance of risks and risk mitigations, the things we do to mitigate risk. And a lot of times it's seen as overhead work. Right? But the reality is it's stuff that has to be done. All right. So part of what we talk about here is this idea of kind of a balance between raising awareness versus training versus education. So there's a balance between those three. And it's not a matter of it's one or the other or the other. It's really kind of in what circumstances do we focus on awareness versus training versus kind of a more formal education. Right? So those are the three topics we're going to talk about this week. So that's we have those both on the slide decks here, the three slide decks, as well as the recorded lectures, which are down here. All right? So there's going to be these 4, 5, and 6 this week. All right. A couple other things. So I had sent a message out around the quizzes. Some folks had reached out to me and said they were having some issues with the quizzes. I went back and checked it. Apparently what happens is I actually had copied this over, the content of this course. Actually, we had done this last year. I think it was last spring. And apparently it looks like we have a pool of questions which basically drive the quizzes and the exams, which not everything came over. All right, so I'm in the process right now. I got the word on Friday, so I've reached out to some folks, and we're working on getting that content and basically reactivating the quizzes. So right now we're kind of hung up right now with the quizzes, but we'll hopefully have it within the next day or so. Tonight's Sunday. I'm hoping to have them up by Tuesday. And what I'll do is I'll send a notice out and keep us in the loop on things. Right. So that's the quizzes. The next thing, or the final thing I want to talk about this week, is introducing, of course, the project, or basically the term project we're going to do. All right. So one of the things that we usually try to do is set up a group project. And so we did it last spring. We've had other sections that we've done. So this is kind of baked into the course. One of the things we've done is basically we kind of take everybody in the class, break them up into teams, and then go through and build a business security policy and continuity plan. And when we do it for the school, basically, the scenario was we would do it for the school. A couple things have come into play. So number one is obviously the fact that we're doing this in an accelerated semester, which kind of makes it a little challenging. And then in addition, we're doing the whole thing online, which makes it even just a little bit more challenging. All right. So what we're going to do is, instead of having a group projects, kind of assuming as a group project, we're going to do this as an individual paper. All right. So what I've actually set up here, so this is below, if you look on the Moodle, below topic 1, I've created a new area here. All right. And basically security policy and business continuity case study. Click this. What I've done is I've basically creating, this is kind of a case study, kind of a foundation of a case study, pretty high level, but it's kind of, this is what we're going to talk about. All right. So scenarios: you are the chief information security officer for an educational institution, like Valley Forge, or it could be any other, could be any number of other schools that are out there. Board of trustees at the schools have expressed concerns about the ability of the school to deal with potential threats to the information technology architecture of the institution. They've approached you, as Chief Information Security Officer, and requested that you develop a program that will identify a couple of things. Number one, what are the key threats to the information technology at the school? And then once we understand what the threats are, to what degree of risk do these threats represent? What is an estimate of the risk associated? Because obviously, not all threats are equal. Right? Some things, you look at this idea of the probability. Basically, what the potential impact of a threat is, balanced against the probability of its occurrence. So, like for example, a comet striking the Earth would be very high impact, obviously, but has low probability of occurring. So you balance one versus the other. But so we do this kind of across the board. But the idea is, what are the key threats we need to be concerned about? And then, what are the estimates? What are the things we really want to be concerned about? And then, what's the plan to mitigate these things? What do we do this in the most efficient fashion? So what we're targeting to do is put together a white paper around this, approximately 7 to 10 pages. What we want to do is identify the key threats that have been identified, prioritization of the threats on the basis of risk, and the steps that need to be taken to reduce the overall potential impact. All right, so that's our kind of the high level around it. So what I'm going to do, the way we're going to do this is, ultimately, by the end of the term, we will craft out a 7 to 10 page paper around this. But what I'm going to do over the course of the next couple of weeks is basically kind of put the content. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of frame out, describe out what we need to research around this, and then you can go out and do some additional research around it, and do some investigations, and kind of put some stuff together. So what I've done with this is, so what I'm going to do weekly is I'll be putting some additional within this section here. I'm going to be putting additional information in here. So I've got if we go back out here to our case study, I've added some content to it as well. So we've got our case study. So this is the overview right now, and then I've added a second page. This is what I'm going to do is, over the course of the next couple of weeks, I will be adding additional activities and resources as we go through to kind of help shape out what this thing would look like, or things to be aware of, and kind of the thought process that would go into the development of a plan like this for a school. All right. So some of the stuff is going to be, and we'll kind of look at what we've got laid out for this week. There's a couple things we need to be aware of. Okay, so one is going to be, from a starting point, is there's really two areas we have to look at. One is this idea of the technology, the IT architecture of the school. Basically, what are the systems, what are the applications, what are the technology that's in place that we're running with. Right? And then in addition to that, we also have the regulatory requirements that when you're running a school, you have to be responsible for. So there's really it's not just simply a technology question. It's also a business um, policy, management, regulatory requirements it needs to be. Right? So, so as we kind of go through this, the idea from the application perspective, from the IT perspective, we look at the application. There's really two different types of applications. Right? So one is the idea of an application, or excuse me, an academic applications. So some examples of that, we'll kind of go more into this as we go through this. For an example, Moodle, the system we're using right now, is an example of an academic, of an academic system. Uh, we have applications we have for registration, um, and there's other ones as well. So we'll kind of go into this as we kind of go through. And then there's things that there are applications that run the business of the school. So these are like, for example, an accounting application it handles our financing. The purchasing application enables us to buy things. Human resources that handles all the school logistics. So we're going to get more information about this, and part of this will be what we're putting out there as we go through this analysis. And then as we get this, then what we'll do is we'll go through and do the evaluation of risks, of potential threats. What are the potential threats? What are the risks associated with those threats? And then what's our mitigation around those? In addition to the applications, there's also the technical infrastructure. So this is going to be things like the communication networks, the servers, workstations, all of the technology, the bits around that. So there's a whole different dimension of things we need to be aware from a security perspective around dealing with 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 this. So that's kind of the technical side of this, kind of business IT architecture side of it. And then from a regulatory, there's specific laws that schools must subscribe to, dealing with capturing and managing data about students. So some examples would be FERPA, Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, Protection of People Rights, Freedom of Information Act, Americans with Disabilities Act. And there's other ones as well, so it's not just simply limited to that. And then there's also others potentially upon where you're at from a locale. So some things, you can have, there could be regulations that are dictated by individual states. There could be regulations that are driven by, the local community. So there's a whole range of different things. So now with this, we're going to be looking at, what we're going to want to look at is the applicable laws and regulations that we need to be, from a school, we need to be aware of. What are the impacts around these, and what are the controls we want to put in place to control that? And then how do we audit that stuff? Because the challenge we run into with these is that, one of these organizations that, basically regulatory organizations, could potentially come to us and say, well, where do you stand with regard to compliance with these regulations? And so these are things we'll be wanting to look at. And these are some of the stuff that we'll want to incorporate into our white paper. Excuse me. In addition, one of the things we're going to be looking at, the other things we're going to look at is this idea, and we'll be talking about this, we're actually within our content, is what we call a business impact analysis. So what that means is there's basically a formal analysis that we can go through, where we will identify what are the applications that are most critical for the school, and then and prioritize them. So because what happens is, if you lose a system, if you have a problem with a system, if something gets disrupted, the first question is, well, what is the potential impact of it? And part of what we do as part of this development of security policies and analysis is in advance try to give some sort of estimate of what are the critical applications, what is the what is the potential impact, And then prioritization of what gets started first, what gets recovered first. All right. So, some of the things we're going to want to talk about there is going to be, okay, what, given this list of applications that we're working with, what should be started first, what should be started second, what should be started third, and then and basically justify it upon an analysis of, okay, these are the ones that are most important. This is about how long we can go without them. Because a lot of times what will happen is you identify what should be your prioritization, and then what will happen is for the ones that are lower priority, you develop what is your manual workaround until those applications come back up. This is all part of what we're looking at with business impact analysis. We're going to be using, one of the things we'll use, as we talk about the NIST and IST, there is a document out there, and we will, I believe I have it posted on the site, but I will, we'll find it. Basically, it's NIST SP 800-34 Rev 1, which provides a business impact analysis template to enable us to do a business impact analysis. Not looking to do, so the business impact analysis is, we're not looking for something massively in depth, but we want to talk, we definitely want to look at the analysis, do probably a lighter version of it, because we're looking to basically capture this from, within a 7 to 10 page paper. So theoretically, you could do a 30-page business impact, depending upon the size of the organization, you could do a 30 to 50-page business impact analysis. So we're looking to be more focused on this. Right, but we're going to want to look at this NIST SP 834 Rev 1 paper to give us some guidance around how we want to maybe construct a business impact analysis, and document it up for the school. Right. And then in addition, what we're going to want, overall, what we're looking at with the paper is kind of across, kind of also the contents, and so it'd be kind of the structure we're going to look at for our for this paper we're going to be working on over the course of the term is, recommend updates to security plans around protection of intellectual property, as we said, business continuity, disaster recovery, business impact analysis, access controls. Basically, where do we need to put access controls? And under what circumstances, and then to what degree. So this stuff needs to be documented. And then finally, this last piece is in the technology domain, but it's also pretty important, this idea of a patch and change management of systems. I've had a lot of circumstances where, patch management is something that's not, maybe not given the level of priority in the organization that it should be. And what happens is, if you're not patching this stuff, what happens is patches are designed and deployed really to fix problems, potential problems, or threats. If you're not patching, you've established basically you're creating a risk. Invariably, a large part, you look at the way hackers, they compromise systems. They're not necessarily developing these, being creative, super creative, and inventing things from thin air. What they're doing is they're going against known vulnerabilities. A lot of times, vulnerabilities that have been patched, or should have been patched, or patches are available but they were never applied. So this whole idea of patch management is going to be an area we're going to want to talk about in our analysis of this recommendation we're going to give back to the Board of Trustees. All right, so that's kind of high level. So I'm going to be introducing this. I'm introducing it this week. We're going to be talking about it over the next couple of weeks as we go through it, continuing to kind of build this out and add more content and structure as we're going ahead with this. All right, and I think that is about it for right now. So if you haven't checked in with me on email yet, send me an email. If you haven't entered a An introduction, please enter an introduction. So we'll get that knocked out. Quizzes, I'm working to resolve the issues with quizzes. I'll send a message out. I'll send an email out as soon as we get that resolved. Obviously, we're going to be looking at topics within 3. We're looking at 4, 5, and 6. Basically, the topics 1.4 through 1.6 is our focus for this week. All right. Any questions? Anything pop up? Feel free to reach out to me. Okay. I think that's it for now. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Take care. Bye. Did I write that in?